The note trembled in my hands as the hospital corridor lights flickered overhead. 42 years of anger, disappointment, and unspoken truths condensed into 3 paragraphs. "Give this to him when he's alone," I told the nurse, who nodded with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd witnessed countless family dramas unfold in these sterile rooms. Dad wouldn't recognize me now anyway, my hair graying at the temples, lines etched around my eyes that weren't there when I vanished from his life 15 years ago. The stroke had left him vulnerable, tethered to machines that beeped in rhythm with his failing heart. Perfect timing, really. He was finally captive to my words after decades of choosing not to hear them. The last time we spoke, he'd looked straight through me as he handed my sister the keys to our family business, the business I'd sacrificed everything to help build. "Blood runs deeper than water," he'd said, his eyes fixed on her Harvard diploma while my community college degree collected dust in my apartment. What he didn't know then, what the note would finally reveal, was exactly whose blood had kept his legacy alive all these years, and the devastating secret my sister had been hiding since we were teenagers. Growing up in a modest suburban home outside of Boston, our family looked picture perfect on Christmas cards. Dad, Mom, my sister Elaine, and me. Dad built Callaway Construction from nothing, a true American success story that made us comfortable but never wealthy enough to forget our roots. Mom was the peacemaker until breast cancer took her when I was 15 and Elaine was 17. After that, everything changed. Dad channeled his grief into work, leaving Elaine and me to raise ourselves. As the older sister, Elaine was golden in his eyes, beautiful, confident, and academically gifted. She had Mom's charm and Dad's ambition, while I inherited Mom's practicality and a quiet determination that often went unnoticed. "Caroline, why can't you apply yourself like your sister?" became Dad's mantra through my high school years. What he never saw was how I managed our household while Elaine focused on college applications. I cooked, cleaned, paid bills, and even helped with company paperwork when Dad brought it home. My B-average grades weren't from lack of effort, they came from exhaustion. I still remember my 18th birthday. Dad promised to take the day off. Instead, he called from the office, apologizing because he needed to attend Elaine's debate championship. "She could get a scholarship from this, Caroline. You understand, right?" I spent the evening alone, calculating our household budget for the month. The summer after Elaine's freshman year at Harvard, Dad's back gave out. The doctor prescribed bed rest for 6 weeks, potentially devastating for a small construction company. While Elaine returned to her summer internship in New York, I deferred my community college plans and stepped in. I learned Dad's business from the ground up, working alongside foremen who initially dismissed me as the boss's kid until they saw my work ethic. By the time Dad recovered, I understood the business better than anyone except him. I continued my education part-time while working at Callaway. Over the next decade, I expanded our residential division, modernized our systems, and helped the company weather the 2008 recession while our competitors folded. Through it all, Elaine visited occasionally, charming Dad with stories of her prestigious law career. He beamed with pride at every achievement, while my contributions faded into the background like wallpaper, essential but invisible. The grand gesture came on my 30th birthday. After years of suggesting innovations to Dad, I presented a comprehensive 5-year growth plan for Callaway. I'd spent months researching, running projections, and meeting with potential clients. Dad seemed impressed, finally seeing me as more than his backup. "Maybe you've got the Callaway business sense after all," he said, patting my shoulder. For once, I felt acknowledged. What I didn't know then was that Elaine harbored a secret that would unravel everything. I discovered it accidentally while organizing company tax documents. a series of transfers from our corporate account to an offshore entity named EC Holdings. The dates coincided with Elaine's college years and early career. Over 7 years, nearly $400,000 had disappeared, money that could have expanded the business or provided security during tough times. When I traced the paper trail, it led straight to my perfect sister's gambling addiction and the debts she'd manipulated Dad into covering without his knowledge, using the company's legal paperwork that only she understood. Dad's 70th birthday approached in the spring of 2018. Despite our complicated relationship, I planned an elaborate celebration at his favorite steakhouse in downtown Boston. I sent invitations to his oldest friends, business associates, and extended family members who'd scattered across New England. For weeks, I coordinated with the restaurant, ordered a custom cake shaped like his first construction site, and even compiled a video tribute from people whose lives he'd touched. Elaine flew in from New York 2 days before the party, immediately critiquing my arrangements. "The steakhouse is so predictable, Caroline," she said, scrolling through her phone. "I could have gotten us into that new place in Beacon Hill. My client owns it." I bit my tongue, reminding myself this weekend wasn't about our rivalry. The morning of the party, Dad called me into his office at home. The room smelled of leather and the sandalwood aftershave he'd used for decades. Family photos lined the shelves, mostly of Elaine at graduations, award ceremonies, and her wedding. Only one included me, a faded snapshot from a company picnic where I stood awkwardly at the edge of the frame. "I've been thinking about the future," Dad said, folding his hands on the mahogany desk I'd helped him select years ago. "I'm not getting any younger." My heart quickened. For 15 years, I'd been his right hand, practically running the company while maintaining the illusion that he was still fully in control. The succession plan I'd drafted sat in my desk drawer, waiting for this moment. Elaine's husband is leaving his law firm. They're moving back to Boston next month. The room tilted slightly. "That's unexpected," I managed. "It's perfect timing. With her legal background and his corporate experience, they can take Callaway to the next level, the kind of level it deserves." His eyes gleamed with excitement I rarely saw directed at me. "Dad, Elaine hasn't worked in the business a single day of her life," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. He waved away my concern. "She's a quick study, always has been. Besides, she'll have you to show her the ropes." The implication was clear. I would train my sister to take over my life's work. "What about my role?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You'll always have a place here, Caroline. You're dependable that way." He offered the familiar pat on my shoulder, the consolation prize I'd received my entire life. I excused myself to check on party details and locked myself in the bathroom, pressing cold water to my face to keep the tears at bay. The embezzlement evidence burned in my bag, documentation I'd planned to discuss with Dad privately after the birthday weekend. Now it felt like both a weapon and a shield. At the restaurant that evening, tension simmered beneath forced smiles. Elaine worked the room with practiced charm, introducing her husband Marcus to Dad's oldest friends as the new blood Callaway Construction needs. I overheard her telling Dad's banker about her vision for modernizing the company using concepts directly from my 5-year plan. During dinner, Dad stood to make an announcement. My stomach nodded as he placed his hand on Elaine's shoulder. "Some of you know I've been considering retirement," he began, glasses of champagne sparkling under the restaurant's chandeliers. "Building this company has been my life's work, and ensuring its future means everything to me." Across the table, Elaine smiled expectantly. Her husband squeezed her hand. That's why I'm thrilled to announce that, effective next month, Elaine will be joining Callaway Construction as our new Chief Executive Officer. Applause erupted around me. Someone patted my back sympathetically. Of course, Carolyn will continue in her role, Dad added as an afterthought, providing the steady support she's always given us. As guests raised their glasses, Dad handed Elaine a small velvet box. Inside gleamed the vintage Rolex that had belonged to his father, the watch he'd always promised to the next Callaway to lead the company, the watch I'd admired since childhood. "To the future of Callaway Construction," Dad proclaimed proudly. "To family legacy," Elaine added, catching my eye with what almost looked like pity. The cake I'd so carefully planned was wheeled out, its detailed construction site design drawing admiration. "Caroline organized everything," someone mentioned. "She's always been good with details," Elaine replied with a dismissive smile. "I'm more of a big-picture person myself." As servers cut the cake, my phone buzzed with a banking alert. I stepped away to check it, finding a notification of a new wire transfer from the company account, $50,000 to EC Holdings, authorized an hour ago. Elaine must have accessed the system remotely during the party preparations. When I returned to the table, Dad was showing off the custom hard hat I'd given him, emblazoned with Callaway Construction, Founding Father. Elaine's gift, a first-edition Hemingway he'd mentioned once in passing years ago, sat prominently beside his plate. "Caroline," Dad called out, "come stand with us for a photo." I moved mechanically to join them, the evidence of fraud heavy in my pocket, as flashbulbs preserved our smiles for posterity. "One big happy family," the photographer directed. Something inside me hardened in that moment. 15 years of invisibility crystallized into resolution. The folder in my bag contained more than just evidence of Elaine's betrayal. It held my freedom from seeking Dad's approval. As guests mingled over coffee and dessert, I overheard Elaine in the hallway, her voice hushed but intense. "Just handle it, Marcus. We need that capital for the company transition. Dad doesn't need to know the details." I didn't need to hear more. The decision I'd been avoiding for years suddenly became clear as day. The party was winding down when I asked for everyone's attention. Conversations quieted as I stood, champagne glass in hand. Dad looked surprised. I rarely sought the spotlight. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "To Dad, who taught me the value of hard work, and to Callaway Construction, which has been my home for 15 years. Approving nods circled the room. Dad smiled cautiously. "It's fitting that we're celebrating succession planning tonight," I continued. "A construction company understands better than most that foundations matter. Without a solid foundation, even the most impressive structure will eventually collapse." I opened my bag and removed the folder I'd prepared. Speaking of foundations, I've discovered some interesting structural issues with our company that I think everyone should be aware of before any transition occurs. Elaine's smile froze. She exchanged a quick glance with Marcus. "Caroline," Dad interrupted, "this isn't the time for business talk." "Actually, Dad, this is exactly the time." I handed him the first document, a spreadsheet tracking every unauthorized transfer. For the past 7 years, someone has been systematically draining company funds into an offshore account called EC Holdings. That's nearly $500,000 that should have gone to employee bonuses, equipment upgrades, or expansion. The room fell silent. Dad's forehead creased as he scanned the numbers. "I don't understand," he muttered. "These are authorized transfers." "Yes, they are," I agreed. "Authorized with your electronic signature, on dates when you were having back surgery, attending industry conferences, or on that fishing trip in Montana. Dates when someone else had access to your laptop and passwords." All eyes turned to Elaine, whose composed exterior began to crack. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice wavered. "Dad, she's obviously jealous about the succession announcement." I placed the second document in front of Dad, bank statements showing the destination of the funds. EC Holdings made regular payments to several casinos in Atlantic City and online gambling sites. Elaine Callaway Holdings, right? The color drained from Dad's face as he connected the dots. "That's enough, Caroline," Elaine hissed, standing abruptly. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, what's embarrassing is spending 15 years giving everything to this company while you were stealing from it," I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "What's embarrassing is watching Dad hand you the keys to the kingdom when you've been systematically undermining its foundation." I turned to face our guests, people who had known our family for decades. "The money isn't even the worst part. The worst part is that I've covered for her, fixed her mistakes, made excuses when vendors weren't paid because funds were mysteriously delayed. I've protected this company's reputation while she's been gambling with its future, literally." Marcus stepped forward. "These accusations are completely unfounded. As Elaine's counsel, I advise everyone to disregard." "As her counsel?" I laughed bitterly. "Or as her accomplice? The most recent transfer happened an hour ago, Marcus. $50,000, while we were all celebrating." Dad looked up from the documents, his face ashen. "Elaine?" For a moment, my sister's carefully constructed facade crumbled. In her eyes, I saw the desperation of addiction, the fear of exposure. "Daddy, I can explain," she began, her voice small, reverting to the childhood name she knew softened him. "There were investments that didn't pan out. I was trying to grow the company's portfolio. Caroline doesn't understand high-level finance." Dad slowly removed the Rolex from her wrist. "Did you use company money to buy this first edition Hemingway too?" The silence was answer enough. I placed the third document on the table, my resignation letter, effective immediately. "I'm done," I said quietly. "The company's books are in order through the end of the quarter. My client relationships are documented. You can reach me through my attorney if you have questions about the evidence I've provided, which I've also forwarded to our company accountant and the state business authority." I gathered my belongings, suddenly exhausted. "Happy birthday, Dad. I hope your golden child's vision for Callaway Construction is everything you dreamed it would be." As I walked toward the door, Dad called out, "Caroline, wait!" I paused but didn't turn around. "You can't just leave," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "We need to discuss this as a family." "We stopped being a family the day Mom died," I replied. "We became a hierarchy with me permanently at the bottom. I don't need that anymore." The last thing I heard as the restaurant door closed behind me was Elaine's voice, high and frantic. "Daddy, she's twisting everything. You know I would never." In the parking lot, rain began to fall, washing away 15 years of suppressed tears as I drove away from Callaway Construction for what I believed was the last time. The days following Dad's birthday meltdown passed in a blur. I shut off my phone, checked into a hotel downtown, and slept for nearly 14 hours straight. The first uninterrupted sleep I'd had in years without worrying about company emergencies. When I finally emerged, I had 27 voicemails and 63 text messages. Most were from Dad, growing increasingly desperate. Some were from longtime employees expressing shock and support. None were from Elaine. My oldest friend, Maya, who'd witnessed my gradual disappearance into Callaway Construction, offered her guest house as a sanctuary. "Stay as long as you need," she said, handing me a key. "Just promise you won't vanish on me too." From Maya's peaceful garden studio, I watched the fallout unfold from a distance. The company accountant, Jim Henderson, called to confirm he'd received my evidence. "The board is meeting tomorrow," he said gravely. "This isn't looking good for your sister or brother-in-law. Did you know they were leveraging company assets for a personal loan?" I hadn't known, but I wasn't surprised. The deeper investigators dug, the more they uncovered. Elaine's gambling addiction had spiraled beyond the embezzlement. She'd taken out loans against company equipment, forged client contracts to secure financing, and even mortgaged the original Callaway construction building without proper authorization. 3 weeks after my departure, Dad's lawyer contacted me requesting a meeting. We met at a neutral location, a conference room at the Boston Public Library. Dad looked older than I remembered, the confident posture replaced by a slight stoop. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Elaine and Marcus have been removed from all company accounts and positions," he said without preamble. The board voted unanimously after the forensic audit. I nodded, unsure what response he expected. "She's in treatment," he continued, staring at his hands. "A gambling addiction program in Vermont. Marcus is cooperating with the investigation to avoid criminal charges." "I'm sorry it came to this," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, Elaine was still my sister. Dad looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? About the money?" The question ignited a spark of anger I thought I'd extinguished. "Would you have believed me? Over her?" His silence was answer enough. "I tried to talk to you about financial discrepancies 3 years ago," I reminded him. "You said I was being paranoid and territorial, that Elaine would never do anything to hurt the family business." He flinched. I was wrong about a lot of things. We sat in uncomfortable silence until he slid a folder across the table, a buyout offer for my share of the company, substantially above market value. "Is this guilt money?" I asked. "It's recognition," he replied, "of what you built, what you're owed." I left the folder unopened. "I'll have my lawyer review it." As I stood to leave, Dad blurted out, "The company's failing without you. We've lost 3 major clients. The Sullivan project is behind schedule. Nobody knows where anything is." For a moment, I felt a vindictive satisfaction, quickly replaced by sadness for the employees whose livelihoods hung in the balance. "You'll figure it out," I said, echoing the dismissive confidence he'd always shown in me. "Caroline," he called as I reached the door. "I didn't see you. All those years, I just didn't see you." I nodded once and left, refusing to let him see me cry. The unexpected twist came 2 months later. While consulting for a rival construction firm, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman introduced herself as Patricia Winters, Mom's college roommate. "Your father asked me to contact you," she explained. "There's something you should know about your mother's wishes." We met at a cafe near the harbor. Patricia brought a weathered envelope addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. "She gave this to me before she died," Patricia explained. "Made me promise to give it to you when you turned 30. I sent it to your father when the time came. He told me you were going through a difficult period and he'd give it to you when things settled down." My hands trembled as I opened the 12-year delayed letter. Mom's familiar script filled the pages, detailing her hopes for my future and her pride in my resilience. The final paragraph stopped my breath. "The house on Maple Street that belonged to my parents isn't just for family vacations, as Dad may have told you. I inherited it outright, and I'm leaving it specifically to you, Caroline." Dad never understood my attachment to it or its value, but the property includes 5 acres of prime harborfront land. By the time you read this, the area will likely be developed. My attorney has the paperwork. The house is yours to keep or sell, but it represents your independence, something I always wanted more of for myself. Don't spend your life in anyone's shadow, sweetheart, especially not your father's. The property Mom described had been sitting abandoned all these years while Dad told us it was tied up in estate complications. When I had my lawyer investigate, we discovered the land was now worth nearly $8 million due to commercial development in the area. Dad had kept this inheritance from me, another betrayal in a long pattern. With this newfound leverage and financial freedom, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of selling the property or using it as a bargaining chip against Dad, I established the Caroline Calloway Foundation for Women in Construction. I renovated the old house into a training center, offering scholarships and apprenticeships to women entering the male-dominated industry. 6 months after opening the center, I received another unexpected call from Dad's doctor. He'd suffered a severe stroke and was asking for me. After 15 years of putting Calloway Construction first, Dad had finally sold the company to a larger firm 3 months earlier. The proceeds went toward repaying debts Elaine had accumulated and creating a trust for the employees who'd stayed loyal through the scandal. Which brings me to today, standing outside his hospital room with a note containing everything I'd wanted to say for decades. The nurse had promised to deliver it when he was alert enough to read. What Dad doesn't know is that I've visited every night for the past week while he was sleeping. I've seen the photos by his bedside, old ones of our family when Mom was alive, and newer ones of me at the foundation opening that he must have gotten from the local paper. He keeps the business card for my foundation on his nightstand, though he's never called the number. As I turned to leave the hospital, the nurse rushed after me. "He's asking for you," she said. "He read your note and wants to see you." "What did he say?" I asked. "Just one word," she replied. "Finally." I knew then that my note, which simply read, "I forgive you, but I don't need your approval anymore," had finally allowed us both to break free from the foundations we'd built our lives upon. Standing in that hospital doorway, I faced a choice: cling to justified anger or embrace the complicated freedom of forgiveness. I chose the latter, not for Dad's sake, but for my own. We spent his final 3 months having the honest conversations we should have started decades earlier. No, they didn't magically heal everything, but they allowed us both to let go of the roles we'd been trapped in for so long. Today, the Caroline Calloway Foundation has helped over 200 women launch careers in construction. Elaine, now 4 years sober, occasionally volunteers as a financial literacy instructor. We're not close, but we're civil, progress neither of us expected. As for Dad's grand gesture, that Rolex meant to symbolize the Calloway legacy, I keep it in my office drawer as a reminder that true legacy isn't passed down through objects or titles. It's built daily through actions, choices, and the courage to redefine family on your own terms. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is walking away from the table where you were always served scraps. Sometimes triumph doesn't look like winning. It looks like creating an entirely new game with rules that don't require your diminishment to make others feel tall. If my story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need permission to rewrite their own family narrative. Remember, disappearing isn't about hiding. Sometimes it's about becoming so magnificently yourself that those who failed to see you can finally recognize what they've lost.